Wendy Crewson's hands trembled as she stared at the photograph that proved her entire life had been a beautiful lie. The image was faded, edges worn soft from time, but the scene remained crystal clear. Rodney, cradling a newborn baby wrapped in a pink hospital blanket, standing beside a young blonde woman whose tired smile radiated joy. Both of them looked at the camera with the unmistakable expression of new parents, exhausted, overwhelmed, deeply in love. The date stamp in the corner showed a summer month from decades ago. The exact summer Rodney claimed he spent overseas building the foundation of his tech startup. The summer Wendy spent alone in their cramped apartment, pregnant with Iris, so violently sick she could barely lift her head from the toilet. The summer she begged him over crackling international phone lines to come home just for a week, just to hold her hand. The summer he said he couldn't, not if they wanted any future at all. She had believed him. God help her, she had believed every word. The photograph slipped from her fingers and fluttered back into the briefcase she'd found, hidden behind the loose paneling in Rodney's study. Wendy had been preparing for their anniversary party, clearing out old files to make space for the caterers, when her hand brushed against the false wall. The wood shifted, revealing a narrow cavity containing a leather briefcase she'd never seen before. The lock had been easy to pick, a skill she'd learned as a teenager back when she was still Wendy Morrison, a girl from Detroit who could fix anything mechanical and had dreams of teaching engineering. Before she became Mrs. Rodney Bartling and learned to smile through disappointment. Her hands shook as she reached back into the briefcase. Beneath the photograph lay a stack of papers held together with a rusted paperclip. Hospital bills from a facility in Portland, Oregon, not Singapore. Oregon. Pediatric care, obstetric services, all marked paid in full. Underneath those, love letters written in flowing feminine script on lavender stationery. The first one began, "My dearest Rod, I miss you already. She has your eyes, you know. Every time I look at our daughter, I see you staring back at me." Wendy's vision blurred. She blinked hard, forcing herself to keep reading. The letters spanned months, chronicling a life Rodney had lived parallel to the one he shared with her. There were references to midnight phone calls, to promises he made about leaving his complicated situation back home, to a future together once everything settled down. The final letter was desperate. "Rod, you said you'd be here for Christmas, our daughter's first Christmas. I'm starting to wonder if you ever meant any of it. Please call me. We need to talk about what happens next." There was no response tucked in with it, just that final plea, unanswered. Wendy pulled out the last document in the briefcase, a partial photocopy of a birth certificate. The father's name was listed as Rodney James Bartling, the mother, Juliet Ann Turner, the baby, Roxanne Marie Turner Bartling, days before that photograph was taken, less than a week before Wendy had given birth to Iris, alone, except for her sister Lorraine, because Rodney was closing a crucial deal overseas. The study walls seemed to close in around her. Decades. She had given this man decades of her life. She'd abandoned her teaching career when he said his startup needed her administrative skills more than any classroom needed another teacher. She'd raised 3 children essentially as a single parent while he traveled constantly, building his empire. She'd stood by him through bankruptcy, through humiliating debt, through nights when they couldn't afford to heat their apartment and fed their babies before feeding themselves. And he had another child, another woman, another life she knew nothing about. But there was more in the briefcase. Wendy's fingers brushed against something small and metallic, a key. Attached to it was a business card for a law firm, Castellano and Associates, Grand Cayman. Her mind raced. Offshore accounts? More secrets. How deep did this deception go? The sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway snapped Wendy back to reality. Rodney was home. She had perhaps 90 seconds before he walked through the front door. Her first instinct was to confront him immediately, to throw the photograph in his face and watch him scramble for explanations. But something stopped her, a cold, calculating clarity she didn't recognize in herself. If she confronted him now, he'd lie. He'd been lying for decades. He was clearly good at it. He'd minimize, justify, manipulate. Maybe he'd even turn it around somehow, make her feel guilty for snooping. That's what men like Rodney did. No, she needed to know everything first. Every secret, every lie, every hidden corner of the life he'd stolen from her. With steady hands that surprised her, Wendy pulled out her phone and photographed every document in the briefcase. The picture, the bills, every letter, the birth certificate, the key and business card. She worked quickly, methodically, her heart pounding but her hands sure. Footsteps on the front porch. She shoved everything back into the briefcase exactly as she'd found it, closed the lock, and slid it back into the hidden cavity. The wood panel clicked into place just as she heard Rodney's key turning in the front door. Wendy stood, smoothed her blouse, and took a deep breath. When she caught her reflection in the study window, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back had the same face, the same dark brown skin, the same natural hair she'd recently let grow out after decades of straightening it for Rodney's business dinners. But her eyes looked different, harder, ancient. She walked out of the study and down the stairs, her footsteps light on the hardwood floors she'd refinished herself last spring while Rodney was in Tokyo, or at least that's where he'd said he was going. "Wendy?" Rodney's voice called from the foyer. "Honey, I'm home." He sounded cheerful, relaxed. Why wouldn't he be? His secret was safe, his double life intact, his devoted wife still playing her role perfectly. Wendy reached the bottom of the stairs and found him setting down his briefcase, a different one, sleek black leather, and loosening his tie. Rodney Bartling was still handsome in that distinguished way white men with money often were. Silver hair perfectly styled, tailored suit hiding the slight paunch he'd developed, blue eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He was smiling now as he looked at her. "There's my beautiful girl. How was your day?" Wendy crossed the foyer and kissed his cheek, just as she had thousands of times before. His cologne was familiar, expensive, the same brand he'd worn since his company finally went public and they could afford luxuries again. "Productive," she said, her voice steady. "I got the study cleaned out for the caterers. You've accumulated so much paperwork over the years. You didn't throw anything important away, did you?" His tone was light, teasing, but something flickered in his eyes. Concern. Fear. "Of course not," Wendy said, taking his briefcase from him. "I know better than to touch your business documents. I just made some space." The tension left his shoulders. "You're the best. What would I do without you? Die alone and unmourned if I have anything to say about it," Wendy thought. But she smiled and said, "You'd probably lose your head if it wasn't attached." Rodney laughed and pulled her into a hug. Wendy let herself be held, counting his heartbeats, steady and untroubled, the heart of a man who slept well despite his lies. "I'm starving," he said, releasing her. "What's for dinner?" "I made your favorite. Pot roast with those baby potatoes you like." His face lit up. "See, this is why I married you. You take such good care of me." He kissed her forehead and headed toward the kitchen, already talking about his day at the office, some meeting with investors, a contract that needed her to review the language because she was always better at catching the details than his lawyers. Wendy followed him, murmuring appropriate responses, playing her part. But her mind was elsewhere, already planning. She would find out everything. Every woman, every child, every hidden account, every secret Rodney Bartling had buried over decades of marriage. And then she would bury him with them. After dinner, after Rodney fell asleep with the TV remote still in his hand, Wendy slipped out of bed at midnight. She dressed in dark clothes, grabbed her purse, and retrieved the safety deposit box key she'd hidden in her bra. all evening. The key was cool against her palm as she walked to her car, parked in the driveway behind Rodney's Mercedes. The night air was crisp, autumn settling into their suburban Connecticut neighborhood where every house looked the same and everyone's secrets stayed behind closed doors. Until now. Wendy started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, glancing once at their bedroom window. The lights were off. Rodney was sleeping peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams liars dream. She drove toward the bank whose name was printed on the key tag, her hands steady on the wheel, her heart beating a rhythm that sounded like revenge. Chapter 2. The Midnight Discovery. Some secrets are buried so deep that finding them changes who you are forever. Wendy sat in her car outside Bridgeport Savings and Trust as dawn broke over the parking lot. She'd been there for hours, parked in the back corner, waiting for the bank to open. She'd brought coffee and a breakfast sandwich she couldn't eat. Her stomach was twisted too tight for food. When the lights inside finally flickered on, Wendy watched as employees filtered in through the back entrance, preparing for another ordinary day. None of them knew that in about half an hour one of their customers would discover her entire marriage was a fraud. She waited until the bank had been open long enough to handle customers but not yet be crowded. Then she grabbed the key, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, and stepped out into the cool morning air. The bank was typical. Marble floors, high ceilings, the hushed atmosphere of money being managed. A young woman at the front desk looked up as Wendy approached. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Wendy's voice was steady. "I need to access a safety deposit box." "Of course. Do you have your key and identification?" Wendy produced both. The key was labeled with a box number. Her ID still read Wendy Morrison Bartling, though she'd been thinking about that hyphen differently since last night. The clerk led her through a heavy door into the vault area, a room lined floor to ceiling with small brass doors. She located the box, inserted the bank's master key alongside Wendy's, and turned both simultaneously. The door swung open, revealing a long metal drawer. "Take your time," the clerk said, gesturing toward a private room. "Just let me know when you're finished." Wendy carried the drawer to the small room and closed the door. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Passports, 4 of them, stacked neatly on top. She opened the first one, and Rodney's face stared back at her, but the name read Robert Brennan. The second, Randall Bishop. The third, Richard Bartlett. The fourth was his real passport, Rodney James Bartling, but even that felt false now. Beneath the passports lay property deeds. Wendy spread them across the small table, her breath coming faster. A house in Vancouver, an apartment in Miami, a villa in Costa Rica, another property in Austin, all purchased over the years, all in Rodney's various names. Bank statements came next, printed on thick paper from institutions she'd never heard of, accounts in the Caymans, in Switzerland, in Singapore. The balances made her dizzy. Millions. Tens of millions. Money she didn't know existed while she clipped coupons and waited for sales at the grocery store because Rodney always said they needed to be careful with spending. But it was the folders that destroyed her. 8 manila folders, each labeled with a woman's name. Wendy opened the first one with shaking hands. Juliet Turner. The photograph from the briefcase was paper-clipped to a birth certificate for Roxanne Marie Turner Bartling. But there were other photos too, Roxanne as a toddler, as a teenager, graduation pictures. Recent ones showed a young woman, beautiful, smiling, holding a college diploma. Rodney had been there for milestones Wendy had documented alone with their own children. The second folder, Gina Caldwell. Location, Costa Rica. Marriage certificate from a beach ceremony, photos of Rodney with Gina and her son, notes in Rodney's handwriting, birthday June, allergies peanuts, soccer practice Thursdays. He'd remembered the allergies. He'd barely remembered their own children's birthdays without Wendy's reminders. Wendy forced herself to open the remaining folders, each one revealing another life Rodney had constructed. Autumn Jang, Vancouver, one daughter, Lay Park, Chicago. One daughter attending private school, Diane Morales, Austin, pregnant in the most recent photo, hand resting on her swollen belly. Sienna Wolf, Boston, so young, barely mid-20s, photo taken just months ago. There were two more folders, but these contained only obituaries and police reports. Camila Vega, Miami. The newspaper clipping showed a beautiful Cuban woman who died in a boating accident. But someone, Rodney, had written in the margin, spoke to M.E., case closed, accidental. The last folder held only a missing person poster, Nina Redmond, last seen in Seattle. The poster was yellowed with age, the edges brittle. Wendy's vision swam. She gripped the edge of the table, trying to breathe through the nausea rising in her throat. Her husband wasn't just a cheater, he was a bigamist, possibly multiple times over. He had children scattered across continents. He'd amassed a fortune while telling her they couldn't afford to fix the leaking roof. And two women connected to him were dead or missing. A knock on the door startled her. "Mom, is everything all right?" Wendy cleared her throat. "Yes, just a few more minutes, please." She pulled out her phone and began photographing everything. Every document, every photo, every damning piece of evidence. Her hands moved mechanically, her mind numb with shock. At the bottom of the drawer was one more document, a folder labeled Contingency Plan. Inside were tickets for a flight to Buenos Aires, Argentina, departing next month. Only Rodney's name, one way. He was planning to disappear. Wendy stared at the tickets, reality crystallizing into something sharp and cold. Rodney wasn't just maintaining multiple families, he was preparing to abandon all of them, to vanish with his hidden fortune and start fresh somewhere no one could find him. She thought about their anniversary party coming up, about Iris's pregnancy announcement at Sunday dinner, about Desmond asking to borrow money for his new business while Rodney claimed they were stretched thin, about Quinn calling late at night, crying because her father never seemed to have time for her anymore. All of it was performance. All of it was lies. Wendy finished photographing the documents, placed everything back exactly as she'd found it, and slid the drawer back into its slot. She walked out of the private room, returned the box to the vault, and thanked the clerk with a smile that felt like shattered glass. In her car, she sat gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing. The morning sun was higher now, warming the parking lot, ordinary people going about their ordinary days. But Wendy's world had just exploded. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rodney. "Morning, beautiful. Meeting running late. Don't wait up for lunch. Love you. Love you." The words made her stomach turn. She didn't respond. Instead, she scrolled through her contacts until she found Lorraine's number. Her sister answered on the second ring. "Wendy, it's barely morning. What's wrong?" Wendy's voice was hollow. "I need to see you, now, and I need the name of that investigator you used when you divorced Gerald." There was a pause. Then Lorraine's voice turned sharp, protective. "What did that son of a bitch do?" "Everything," Wendy whispered. "He did everything." She started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, her phone ringing as Lorraine called back immediately, but Wendy couldn't talk. Not yet. Not until she figured out how to put into words the fact that her entire life had been a carefully constructed stage play, and she'd been the only one who didn't know she was acting. Chapter 3. The Investigator. Hiring someone to destroy your own life takes a special kind of courage, or desperation. Malcolm Reeves had the kind of face that inspired trust. Weathered but kind, with grey eyes that missed nothing and the patience of someone who'd spent a career waiting for criminals to make mistakes. His office in downtown Hartford was modest, cluttered with file folders and empty coffee cups, a space that spoke of competence over comfort. Wendy sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap, while Lorraine paced near the window like a caged animal ready to strike. "Tell me everything," Malcolm said, opening a fresh notebook. So Wendy did. She showed him the photographs on her phone, the original image of Rodney with baby Roxanne, every document from the safety deposit box, The passports, the property deeds, the folders full of other women, the tickets to Argentina. Malcolm's expression never changed as he studied each image, but his jaw tightened when he reached the folder about Camila Vega's death. "This one," he said quietly, tapping the screen. "This bothers me." "The boating accident." Wendy's voice was barely a whisper. "I worked homicide for years before I went private. Accidental drownings get labeled that way when there's not enough evidence otherwise, but that doesn't mean they are." He looked up at Wendy. "Did your husband ever show any signs of violence?" Wendy wanted to say no immediately, but memory stopped her. She thought about the time Rodney punched a hole in their bedroom wall after a business deal fell through, the way he'd grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise when she questioned a large withdrawal from their account, how their dog Max had disappeared one summer after Rodney complained about the barking, and how Rodney had insisted Max ran away despite the locked fence. "Maybe," she admitted. "Nothing I recognized at the time." Lorraine stopped pacing. "Jesus, Wendy, did he hurt you?" "Not physically, not really. But he had this way of making you feel small, like you were always one mistake away from losing everything." Malcolm wrote something down. "That's control. Classic abuser behavior, just subtle enough that you normalize it." He looked back at the phone. "I'll need copies of everything you have. And I want to look into these other women, especially this missing person, Nina Redmond." "How long will it take?" Wendy asked. "To gather basic information? Maybe a week, but Mrs. Bartling, I need to ask you something important." Malcolm leaned forward. "Once you know the truth, all of it, you can't unknow it. Are you prepared for what we might find?" Wendy met his eyes. "I've spent decades not knowing the truth. I'm not afraid of it anymore." Malcolm nodded slowly. "Then we start digging. But you need to be careful at home. Don't let him suspect anything. Can you do that?" "I've been doing it my whole marriage," Wendy said. "What's a little longer?" She left Malcolm's office with a strange sense of purpose. Lorraine drove her back to her car at the bank, gripping her hand the entire way. "Stay with me," Lorraine urged. "You don't have to go back there tonight." But Wendy shook her head. "If I don't go home, he'll know something's wrong. I need to keep everything normal until Malcolm finds out what we're dealing with." "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for," Lorraine said, her voice thick. "I should have seen what he was doing to you. He hid it from everyone. That was the point." Wendy squeezed her sister's hand. "But not anymore." That evening, Wendy returned home to find Desmond's car in the driveway. Her heart sank. She wasn't ready to face her children yet, not while carrying the weight of what she knew. Inside, she found Desmond in the kitchen with Rodney, both of them laughing over beers. Desmond's face lit up when he saw her. "Mom, Dad was just telling me about his trip next month. He says you guys are finally taking a real vacation." Wendy's blood turned to ice. She looked at Rodney, who met her gaze with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That's right," Rodney said smoothly. "Argentina. I've always wanted to show your mother Buenos Aires. We leave in a few weeks." The lie rolled off his tongue so easily. Wendy wondered how many thousands of lies he'd told over the years, how many times she'd believed him without question. "That sounds amazing," she heard herself say. "You know I've always wanted to travel more." Desmond beamed. "You deserve it, Mom. You guys have been working so hard." After Desmond left, Wendy and Rodney were alone. He moved closer, running his hand down her arm. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "Everything okay?" Wendy forced herself not to flinch. "Just tired. Planning the anniversary party has been more work than I expected." "We could cancel it," Rodney suggested. "Just go to dinner, the two of us." "No," Wendy said quickly. Too quickly. She softened her tone. "Everyone's already planning to come. Iris would be disappointed." Rodney studied her face for a long moment, and Wendy wondered if he could see through her performance. But then he shrugged and kissed her forehead. "Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart." That night, Wendy lay awake, listening to Rodney breathe beside her. She thought about Juliet Turner, Gina Caldwell, Autumn Jang, Leigh Park, Diane Morales, Sienna Wolfe, all the women trapped in Rodney's web, believing his promises, waiting for him to choose them. She thought about Camilla Vega, who died when she threatened to expose him. She thought about Nina Redmond, who'd simply vanished. And she thought about the tickets to Argentina, about Rodney's plan to abandon everyone and disappear into a new life with a new name, leaving destruction in his wake. Not this time, Wendy promised herself. This time, you're the one who's going to disappear. Over the next week, Wendy became a ghost in her own life. She smiled at the right times, cooked Rodney's favorite meals, asked about his day. But every moment alone she was documenting. She photographed his computer when he left it unlocked. She recorded phone conversations when he stepped outside to take calls. She rifled through his wallet while he showered, copying down phone numbers and business cards. Malcolm called her regularly with updates, always when Rodney was at work. The investigation was revealing connections between the women, patterns of how Rodney had found them, seduced them, trapped them. Then Malcolm called with news that changed everything. "I found her," he said. "Juliet Turner. She's living just outside New Haven, less than an hour from your house." Wendy's grip tightened on the phone. Has she been there the whole time? According to property records, Rodney's been paying for that house since before their daughter was born. "Wendy, he's been living a double life right in your backyard." Something inside Wendy cracked. All those business trips to New York, all those late nights at the office, all those times he'd been unreachable for hours. He'd been with them. "I need her address," Wendy said. "I don't think that's a good—" "Malcolm, the address." There was a pause. Then Malcolm gave it to her. That afternoon, Wendy told Rodney she was going shopping with Lorraine. Instead, she drove to New Haven, to a quiet neighborhood of modest homes, and parked across the street from the address Malcolm had given her. The house was small but well-maintained, with a tidy garden and a porch swing. A car sat in the driveway. A sedan, practical, unremarkable. Wendy waited. Half an hour later, a woman emerged. Blonde, probably close to Wendy's age now, though she'd been young in the photograph. She carried grocery bags, walking with the slightly tired gait of someone who'd been working hard all day. This was Juliet Turner, the woman who'd been sharing Wendy's husband for decades. Wendy's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She'd come here planning to confront Juliet, to scream at her, to make her understand the damage she'd caused. But watching Juliet struggle with her bags, seeing the small house, the modest car, the lack of any obvious wealth despite Rodney's millions, Wendy realized something. Juliet Turner wasn't living like a mistress. She was living like another wife, another prisoner of Rodney's lies. Before Wendy could talk herself out of it, she got out of her car and crossed the street. Juliet was opening her front door when Wendy called out, "Juliet Turner." The woman turned, saw Wendy, and her face went pale. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Juliet whispered, "You're her. You're Rodney's wife." "So are you," Wendy said. "We need to talk." Chapter 4. The Daughter. Learning your husband has a secret child is devastating. Learning she's been 10 minutes away for decades is unbearable. Juliet Turner's kitchen smelled like coffee and cinnamon, warm and lived in, the kind of space that told stories about the woman who inhabited it. Photographs lined the walls, mostly of a young woman at various ages, progressing from infant to adult. Roxanne, Wendy realized. Rodney's daughter. Her husband's other child. They sat across from each other at a small wooden table, two women connected by betrayal, neither quite knowing where to begin. Juliet spoke first, her voice raw. "How long have you known?" "Less than 2 weeks. I found a photograph." Wendy pulled out her phone, showing Juliet the image from the briefcase. "This was hidden in his study." Juliet's eyes filled with tears. "He said he destroyed all of those. He told me it was safer if nothing existed." "He lied," Wendy said flatly. That seems to be his specialty. Juliet laughed bitterly. You have no idea. She stood, poured them both coffee, and sat back down with the weariness of someone about to confess sins that weren't hers. He told me you two were separated, that you were only together for the children, that the marriage was dead but you wouldn't divorce him because of your religious beliefs. Wendy felt something crack inside her chest. I'm not religious. We've never been separated. I know that now, Juliet whispered. But back then, I was young and stupid and desperate to believe someone like him could actually want someone like me. She told her story haltingly, painfully. She'd met Rodney at a tech conference where she was working as a hotel receptionist. He'd been charming, attentive, everything her ex-boyfriend hadn't been. He pursued her with flowers and late-night conversations, told her she was brilliant and beautiful and deserved better than her minimum-wage job. When she got pregnant, he'd been thrilled, promised her a future, rented her this house, set up an account for expenses, swore he'd leave his wife once his business stabilized. But he never left, Juliet continued, staring into her coffee. The business stabilized, the kids grew up, and he still kept coming here, playing house for a few hours, then disappearing back to his real life. Eventually, I stopped asking when. I just accepted that this was what I got. Why didn't you leave him? Wendy asked. Where would I go? Juliet's voice broke. I have a daughter. He controlled all the money. I tried to get a job once, and he told me if I did, he'd stop supporting Roxanne. He'd let her drop out of college, ruin her future. So I stayed. I stayed in this house, in this half-life, waiting for scraps of attention from a man who never belonged to me. Wendy saw herself reflected in Juliet's words. Different prisons, same warden. Does Roxanne know? Wendy asked. About me? She knows he's married. He told her eventually, when she got old enough to ask questions. She hates him for it, but she loves him too. It's complicated. The front door opened suddenly and both women turned. A young woman stepped inside, stopping dead when she saw Wendy. She looked exactly like Rodney, the same blue eyes, the same sharp cheekbones, the same expression of carefully controlled surprise. Mom, Roxanne's voice was uncertain. Who's this? Juliet stood, reaching for her daughter. Roxanne, this is Wendy Bartling. She's Dad's wife, Roxanne finished, her jaw tightening. I recognize you from photos. He keeps one in his wallet. She laughed harshly. Right next to the one of me. Wendy stood, unsure what to say. This young woman was Rodney's daughter, her children's half-sister, and a stranger all at once. I didn't come here to cause problems, Wendy started, but Roxanne cut her off. Problems? Lady, you are the problem. You're the reason my father only shows up here once a week. You're the reason my mum has been sitting in this house for my entire life, waiting for a man who never chooses her. Roxanne, stop! Juliet's voice was firm. This isn't her fault. Isn't it? Roxanne's eyes blazed. She's the legitimate one, the real wife. We're just the secret he keeps. Wendy felt something shift inside her. You think I'm legitimate? You think I'm the chosen one? She pulled out her phone, showing them the photographs from the safety deposit box. He has 6 other families, Roxanne. Maybe more. And next month, he's planning to abandon all of us and flee to Argentina with millions he stole from his own company. The room fell silent. Juliet and Roxanne stared at the phone, scrolling through image after image of other women, other children, other lives Rodney had constructed. Oh my God, Juliet breathed. We're not special. We're not even unique. Roxanne sank into a chair, her anger crumbling into devastation. I have other siblings. Yes, Wendy said quietly, half-siblings scattered across the world, and I have an investigator looking into 2 women connected to your father who are dead or missing. Juliet's face went white. Dead? Wendy told them about Camilla Vega, about Nina Redmond, about Malcolm's suspicions. With every word, she watched their faces transform from hurt to horror. He wouldn't, Juliet whispered, but her voice held no conviction. Wouldn't he? Wendy countered. Look at what he's already done. Look at how many lives he's destroyed without a second thought. If someone threatened to expose him, what would he do? Roxanne stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen. Last month, Dad came here acting strange, nervous. He kept asking Mom if anyone had contacted her, if she'd talked to any reporters or investigators. When she said no, he seemed relieved. Wendy's pulse quickened. He's worried. Something spooked him. Or someone, Juliet added. She looked at Wendy with dawning realization. You're not here just to yell at me. You're gathering information. I'm building a case, Wendy corrected. I'm going to expose him for everything he's done. But I can't do it alone. I need testimony from the women he's victimized. I need proof of his lies, his manipulation, his crimes. Juliet shook her head. If I testify against him, he'll cut me off completely. I have no job, no skills, nothing. How am I supposed to survive? The same way you'll survive when he disappears to Argentina and leaves you with nothing, Wendy said bluntly. Because that's what's going to happen. You've seen the tickets. He's leaving, and when he does, all the support he's been giving you vanishes. You'll lose this house, lose everything. Roxanne grabbed her mother's hand. She's right, Mom. He's been pulling away lately, cancelling visits, making excuses. I told you something felt wrong. Juliet looked between them, tears streaming down her face. I spent my whole life waiting for him, and you're telling me it was all for nothing. Not nothing, Wendy said gently. You have Roxanne, that's something. But Juliet, he needs to pay for what he's done. To you, to me, to all of us. There was a long silence. Then Roxanne spoke, her voice steady despite her tears. I want to help. Tell me what you need. Wendy felt something loosen in her chest. Everything. Bank statements, texts, emails, any proof of his promises, recordings if you have them, documentation of the support he's provided, and any threats he's made. He's threatened Mom plenty, Roxanne said grimly. Always subtle, always disguised as concern, but it's control. Then we document it, Wendy said. All of it. Juliet finally nodded, wiping her eyes. What happens to us after, when this is all over? I don't know, Wendy admitted, but I promise you this. Whatever Rodney has hidden, whatever money he's stolen, I'm going to make sure every woman he's hurt gets a share. You won't be left with nothing. They spent the next few hours going through Juliet's records. She'd kept everything, decades of receipts, emails, text messages, even handwritten notes from Rodney. Together, they built a timeline that showed his pattern of manipulation, his escalating control, his careful construction of lies. As evening approached, Wendy prepared to leave. At the door, Juliet grabbed her arm. I'm sorry, Juliet said, for my part in this. I should have questioned more, should have seen through him sooner. Wendy looked at this woman who'd been another casualty of Rodney's selfishness and felt her anger shift. Juliet wasn't the enemy. Neither were any of the other women. We were all victims, Wendy said, but we don't have to stay that way. Driving home, Wendy's phone rang. Malcolm. We found something, he said without preamble. Gina Caldwell, the wife in Costa Rica. She's been trying to reach you. Wendy's heart hammered. How does she even know about me? She hired her own investigator. Rodney got sloppy, left a paper trail. She's not the only one who's figured out he's been lying. We've got at least 3 other women who know something's wrong and are starting to connect the dots. Can you put me in touch with them? Already done. I sent you their contact information. But Wendy, there's something else. Something you need to know about the woman who died, Camila Vega. Wendy pulled over to the side of the road, her hands shaking. Tell me. Her sister, Rosa, has been investigating the death privately. She has evidence that Camila called Rodney the night she died, threatening to go to the police about his fraud. 2 hours later, she was dead. Can Rosa prove it? Not yet, but she's got phone records. witness statements that were never properly investigated, and she's willing to push for the case to be reopened. If we can connect Rodney to that death, we're not just talking about fraud and bigamy anymore. We're talking about murder, Wendy finished. Exactly. Wendy sat in her car on the side of the road, watching traffic flow past, normal people living normal lives. She thought about going home, crawling into bed next to a man who might be a killer, but she also thought about Camilla Vega, about Nina Redmond, about all the women still trapped in Rodney's web of lies. "Connect me with Rosa," Wendy said, "and with all the other wives. It's time we all had a conversation." "Are you sure about this?" Malcolm asked. "Once you start bringing them together, there's no going back. Rodney will find out eventually." "Good," Wendy said coldly. "Let him find out. Let him feel what it's like when your whole world collapses around you and there's nothing you can do to stop it." She hung up and started the car, heading home to play the role of devoted wife one more time. But now she wasn't alone. Now she had allies, and together they were going to destroy him. Chapter 5. The Performance. The hardest role of her life was pretending to love a monster while gathering evidence to bury him. Sunday dinner at the Bartling house had always been a family tradition. Wendy set the table with her grandmother's china, the good silverware, crystal glasses that caught the late afternoon light. Everything perfect, everything in its place, just like always, except nothing was like always, not anymore. Iris arrived first with her husband, Brandon, her hand resting protectively on the small curve of her belly. Desmond came next, carrying a bottle of expensive wine. Quinn was last as usual, rushing in apologizing about traffic while hugging everyone. Rodney presided over it all like a benevolent king, pouring drinks, asking about their lives, playing the devoted father with an ease that made Wendy's stomach turn. She watched him from the kitchen doorway while pretending to check the roast. This man had held their babies, taught them to ride bikes, walked Iris down the aisle at her wedding. He'd also abandoned them emotionally their entire lives, choosing his secret families over the legitimate one again and again. And they had no idea. "Mom," Iris appeared beside her, concern creasing her forehead. "You okay? You seem distant." Wendy forced a smile, touching her daughter's face. "Just emotional. You know how I get." "About the baby?" Iris's expression softened. "I know it's big news. I'm scared too. If only fear were the problem." Wendy pulled Iris into a hug, breathing in her daughter's familiar scent, vanilla and something floral. How could she tell Iris that her father was a fraud, that the family they'd built together was constructed on quicksand? Not yet. Not until she had everything in place. They gathered at the dining table, Rodney at the head as always, Wendy at the opposite end. The children filled the space between them with laughter and stories, unaware of the chasm widening beneath their feet. Halfway through dinner, Iris stood, tapping her glass with a fork. "We have an announcement." Brandon grinned beside her, taking her hand. "We're pregnant," Iris said, her voice trembling with joy. "You're going to be grandparents." The table erupted. Desmond jumped up to hug his sister. Quinn squealed and rushed around the table. Rodney's face lit up with what looked like genuine delight, and for a moment, Wendy almost believed it. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Rodney said, moving to embrace Iris. "Your mother and I are so happy for you." Wendy found herself pulled into the celebration, hugging Iris, feeling the life growing inside her daughter. A grandchild. A new generation. And all Wendy could think was, what kind of grandfather will Rodney be? Will he abandon this child too, the way he's abandoned so many others? "We should toast," Rodney announced, pouring champagne. He raised his glass. "To Iris and Brandon, and to the newest member of our family, may they know nothing but happiness and love." The hypocrisy of those words nearly made Wendy choke. They toasted, they celebrated, and through it all, Wendy played her part perfectly. The excited grandmother-to-be, the supportive mother, the devoted wife. After dinner, while Rodney took the kids outside to show Desmond something in the garage, Lorraine appeared in the kitchen doorway. Wendy hadn't even known her sister was coming. "Iris called me," Lorraine said quietly. "Said you seemed off. I told her I was nearby and would stop in." Wendy's hands stilled over the dishes she was washing. "I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. Always have been." Lorraine moved beside her, taking a dish towel. "How much longer can you keep this up?" "As long as it takes," Wendy whispered. "Malcolm is coordinating with the other women. We're building an airtight case, but I need more time." "Time for what?" "Wendy, that man is planning to leave the country. What if he goes sooner than you think?" "He won't. His tickets are for next month, and he still thinks I'm going with him. He has no idea I know anything." Lorraine's jaw tightened. "And what about our babies? When are you going to tell them their father is a monster?" "After," Wendy said firmly. "After we have everything in place. After he can't talk his way out of it or manipulate them into doubting me. They need to see the proof with their own eyes." Laughter drifted in from outside. Through the window, Wendy could see Rodney with their children, his arm around Iris, gesturing animatedly while telling some story. They looked happy, whole. It was all about to shatter. "I talked to Juliet again this morning," Wendy continued. "She's connected me with two of the other women, Gina in Costa Rica and Autumn in Vancouver. They're both ready to testify. Malcolm is working on reaching the others." "What about the dead woman, Camilla?" "Rosa, her sister, has evidence that was never properly investigated. She's pushing to reopen the case. If we can prove Rodney was involved." Wendy's voice trailed off. "Then we're not just talking about fraud," Lorraine finished. "We're talking about murder." The word hung between them, heavy and terrible. That night, after everyone left and the house fell quiet, Wendy lay in bed beside Rodney. He was reviewing documents on his tablet, glasses perched on his nose, looking every inch the successful businessman. "That was nice," he said absently, "having everyone together." "Yes," Wendy agreed. Iris seemed happy. "A grandchild," Rodney smiled. "Hard to believe we're old enough for that." Wendy thought about Rodney's other grandchildren, the ones in Costa Rica, the ones he'd never told her about, the ones he saw a handful of times during the year while pretending to be on business trips. "Rodney," she said carefully, "this trip to Argentina, are you sure we can afford it? With the baby coming, I thought we might want to save money to help Iris and Brandon." Something flickered across his face. "We can afford it. I've been setting aside money specifically for this trip. It's important to me, Wendy. I want to spend quality time with you, just the two of us, before life gets hectic with grandchildren." The lies flowed so smoothly, no hesitation, no guilt, just performance. "That's sweet," Wendy said, and she reached for his hand. He squeezed her fingers, smiling. "I love you. You know that, right?" Wendy looked into his eyes, the eyes she'd looked into thousands of times over decades of marriage, and saw a stranger. "I know," she lied. Over the next week, Wendy's double life intensified. During the day, she coordinated with Malcolm and the other women. Gina sent financial records showing Rodney's support payments and promises. Autumn provided emails where Rodney described Wendy as his business partner rather than his wife, claiming he stayed with her only because she held shares in his company. Leigh from Chicago revealed that Rodney had married her in a traditional ceremony, complete with paperwork that he assured her was legal. It wasn't. The marriage wasn't recognized internationally, and Rodney knew it. Diane in Austin was the most recent victim, young and pregnant and terrified. She'd discovered Rodney's lies when she tried to add him to her lease, and the landlord informed her the man she knew as Richard Bartlett didn't exist in any database. Each woman's story added another piece to the puzzle of Rodney's decades of deception, but the most disturbing information came from Sienna, the youngest woman in Rodney's web. Malcolm set up a secure video call with her. When Sienna's face appeared on screen, Wendy was struck by how young she looked, barely out of college, with the kind of innocence that made Wendy's heart ache. "Thank you for talking to me," Wendy said gently. "I know this must be difficult." Sienna's eyes were red from crying. "He told me he was divorced. He showed me pictures of his ex-wife, you, and said you'd had a bitter split. He said you were trying to take everything from him. That's why he had to be careful with money." "I'm not divorced," Wendy said. "I didn't even know you existed until a week ago." Sienna's face crumpled. "I'm so stupid. I should have seen through him." "You're not stupid. You're a victim. We all are." Wendy leaned forward. "Sienna, Malcolm says you have information about Rodney becoming violent." Sienna nodded, wiping her eyes. "I tried to break up with him last month. Told him I was moving to Seattle for a job opportunity. He showed up at my apartment and—" She pulled down her collar, showing a fading bruise. "He grabbed me, told me I wasn't going anywhere. Said he'd invested too much in me to let me leave." Wendy felt cold rage settle in her chest. "Did you file a police report?" "I was too scared. He apologized the next day, sent flowers, said it would never happen again, but then he started showing up unannounced, checking my phone, demanding to know where I was every minute. I feel like I'm being watched all the time." "You probably are," Malcolm interjected from off-screen. "I did a sweep of her apartment yesterday, found a tracking device in her car and listening equipment in her bedroom." Wendy's blood ran cold. "He's monitoring you?" "And probably others," Malcolm said grimly. "I'm having all the women check their homes and vehicles. If Rodney's this paranoid, he's preparing for something." After the call ended, Wendy sat in her car. She'd driven to a parking garage to ensure privacy and tried to process what she'd learned. Rodney wasn't just a liar and a bigamist. He was surveilling his victims, potentially hurting them, controlling every aspect of their lives. And she was sleeping next to him every night. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Rosa Vega, Camilla's sister. Malcolm gave me your number. We need to talk about what my sister discovered before she died. Call me." Wendy's hands shook as she dialed. Rosa answered immediately. "Mrs. Bartling? Call me Wendy, please." "Wendy, then. I've been investigating my sister's death privately for a long time. The police said it was an accident, but Camilla was an experienced boater. She wouldn't have drowned that way." "What do you think happened?" "I think your husband killed her." Rosa's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. "The night she died, Camilla called me. She was terrified. She said she'd discovered Rodney was married to at least 3 other women and had children all over the world. She'd confronted him, threatened to go to the police." Wendy gripped the phone harder. "Do you have proof?" "I have her phone records showing she called him that night. I have text messages between them. And I have something else. A witness who saw Rodney at the marina where Camilla died. But the witness was never properly questioned because the police ruled it an accident so quickly." "Why would they do that?" Rosa laughed bitterly. "Because Rodney donated a lot of money to the police benevolent fund. Because he had connections. Because rich white men don't get investigated thoroughly in this country, especially when their victims are women of color." Wendy thought about Camilla, young, beautiful, Cuban, and felt sick. "What do you need from me?" "Help me reopen the case. With all these other women coming forward, with proof of his pattern of behavior, maybe the police will actually listen this time. Maybe we can get justice for Camilla." "I'll do whatever it takes," Wendy promised. That night, Wendy came home to find Rodney in an unusually good mood. He'd made dinner, a rarity, and set candles on the table. "What's the occasion?" Wendy asked, forcing herself to smile. "Do I need an occasion to romance my wife?" He pulled out her chair. "I just realized I've been distracted lately. I want to make sure you know how much you mean to me." They ate by candlelight, Rodney asking about her day, telling jokes, being charming in the way he'd been when they were young. It was a performance, Wendy knew now. Everything was always a performance. But she played along, laughing at his jokes, touching his hand across the table, because that's what you did when you were gathering evidence against a predator. You made him think he was still winning. After dinner, Rodney pulled her close, swaying to music playing from his phone. "Remember when we used to dance in our first apartment?" he murmured. "No furniture, no money, just us and a dream." Wendy remembered. She also remembered being pregnant and alone while he built secret families across the country. "I remember," she said, resting her head against his chest, counting his heartbeats, wondering if a heart that beat so steadily could belong to a monster. "I want to get back to that," Rodney continued. "That's why Argentina is so important. A chance to reconnect, to remember who we were before life got complicated." Complicated. What a delicate word for decades of systematic betrayal. "I'm looking forward to it," Wendy lied. Later, lying in the dark, Rodney's arm heavy across her waist, Wendy's phone buzzed with a text from Malcolm. "Meeting tomorrow, all the women together. It's time to plan how we take him down." Wendy deleted the message and closed her eyes. Soon, she promised herself. Very soon, Rodney Bartling would discover what happened when you built an empire on lies. It collapsed, burying you in the rubble. Chapter 6. The newest victim saving a stranger from your husband's web might be the only thing that makes you feel human again. The address Malcolm had given Wendy led to a small apartment complex in a rundown part of Boston. The building was shabby, paint peeling, with the kind of wear that spoke of landlords who didn't care and tenants who couldn't afford better. Wendy sat in her car, gathering courage. Malcolm had found surveillance footage showing Rodney visiting this address regularly over the past several months. The apartment belonged to Sienna Wolfe, the young woman they'd spoken to on the video call. But there was something Malcolm hadn't told Sienna. Rodney had visited her apartment the previous night, late, and he'd stayed for several hours. Wendy didn't know what she'd find when she knocked on that door, but she knew she had to try. She climbed the stairs to the third floor, found apartment number 12, and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time. "Go away." The voice was muffled, thick with tears or sleep or both. "Sienna, my name is Wendy Bartling. We spoke on the phone. I need to talk to you, please." A long silence. Then the sound of locks turning. The door opened a crack, revealing a young woman with dark circles under her eyes and a fresh bruise blooming on her cheek. "He came back," Sienna whispered. Wendy felt cold fury wash over her. "Can I come in?" Sienna stepped aside, and Wendy entered a small studio apartment that was barely furnished. The only personal touches were some framed photographs and a bookshelf overflowing with textbooks. On the floor near the door, glass glittered from a broken picture frame. "What happened?" Wendy asked gently. Sienna sank onto her futon, pulling a blanket around herself despite the warmth of the apartment. "After I talked to you and Malcolm, I started going through my things, looking for the tracking devices you mentioned. I found one in my purse. I was so angry, I threw it in the trash. And Rodney noticed you stopped moving. He showed up at midnight, pounding on the door, demanding to know why I went off the grid. I tried to stay calm, told him my phone died and I was sleeping, but he knew I was lying." She touched her bruised cheek. "He's never hit my face before. Usually he's careful to hurt me where no one can see." Wendy sat beside her, rage and protectiveness warring in her chest. This girl was young enough to be her daughter. "You can't stay here. He knows where you live. If he's escalating, it's not safe." "I have nowhere else to go. My family—" Sienna's voice broke. "Rodney made me cut ties with them. Said they were toxic, that they didn't support me. I believed him. I always believe him." "You're not alone anymore," Wendy said firmly. "I have a plan, but I need you to trust me." Over the next hour, Wendy helped Sienna pack essentials. While Sienna gathered clothes, Wendy called Lorraine. "I need a favor," Wendy said. "A big one." "Name it." "I'm bringing someone to your house. She can't stay long, maybe a week or two, but she needs somewhere safe, somewhere Rodney doesn't know about." There was a pause. "Another wife?" "Another victim," Wendy corrected. She's half my age, and he's been hurting her. Bring her now, Lorraine said immediately. I've got a spare room and a security system, and if that bastard shows up here, I'll introduce him to my shotgun. Wendy had never loved her sister more. They were packing Sienna's laptop when someone knocked on the door. Both women froze. Sienna, Rodney's voice muffled but unmistakable. Open up, sweetheart. I brought breakfast. I want to apologize for last night. Wendy's heart hammered. She looked at Sienna, who'd gone pale with terror. The fire escape, Sienna whispered, pointing to the window. What about your things? Leave them. Please, we have to go now. They moved quickly, quietly. Wendy helped Sienna through the window onto the metal fire escape, while Rodney continued knocking, his voice growing more insistent. Sienna, I know you're in there. Your car's in the lot. Come on, don't be childish. They descended the fire escape, Sienna moving with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before. That realization made Wendy's stomach turn. How many times had this girl escaped her own apartment to avoid Rodney? They reached the ground and ran to Wendy's car. Wendy started the engine with shaking hands, pulling out of the parking lot just as she saw Rodney's Mercedes turning in. Get down, Wendy hissed, and Sienna ducked below the dashboard. They passed Rodney's car. Wendy kept her eyes forward, her hands steady on the wheel, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. In her rearview mirror, she saw Rodney's car parked near the building. He got out, carrying a bag from an expensive bakery, looking for all the world like a caring boyfriend bringing apology pastries. Only when they were several blocks away did Wendy let out her breath. You can sit up now. Sienna emerged from the footwell, tears streaming down her face. What if he finds out you helped me? What if he hurts you? Let him try, Wendy said grimly. I'm not some girl he can intimidate. I'm his wife, and I know things he doesn't think I know. They drove to Lorraine's house in silence. Lorraine was waiting on the porch, and she pulled Sienna into a hug the moment they arrived, mothering her in a way that made Sienna break down completely. You're safe here, Lorraine promised. Nobody gets past me. After settling Sienna in the guest room, Wendy and Lorraine sat in the kitchen drinking coffee that neither of them wanted. He's getting desperate, Lorraine said. Violent. That means he knows something's wrong. Or he's always been like this, and I just never saw it, Wendy countered. How many times did he hurt those women where I couldn't see? How many of them were too scared to leave? Her phone buzzed. A text from Malcolm. Meeting confirmed for tomorrow evening. All 6 women will be there via video, plus Rosa Vega. This is happening, Wendy. Tomorrow. One more day of pretending everything was normal. One more day of sleeping beside a man who was becoming more dangerous by the hour. That evening, Wendy returned home to find Rodney in his study, staring at his computer with an intensity that made her pause in the doorway. Everything okay? She asked. He looked up, and for a moment his expression was unguarded, frustrated, almost frightened. Then the mask slid back into place. Fine. Just dealing with some security issues at the office. Anything serious? Nothing I can't handle. He closed his laptop and stood, crossing to her. Where were you all day? I tried calling. Shopping with Lorraine. My phone died. The lies came easier now. I should have charged it. Sorry. He studied her face, and Wendy forced herself to meet his gaze without flinching. After a moment, Rodney nodded. How was your sister? Good. She asked about the anniversary party. Wants to know if she can bring someone. Of course. Rodney's smile didn't reach his eyes. The more the merrier. That night, Rodney made love to her with an intensity that felt almost frantic, and afterward he held her tighter than usual, his face buried in her hair. I love you, he murmured. You know that, right? Whatever happens, I love you. Whatever happens. The words sent ice down Wendy's spine. I know, she whispered into the darkness, and felt him relax against her. Within minutes, he was asleep. Wendy lay awake, listening to his breathing, thinking about Sienna's bruised face and Camilla Vega's suspicious death and all the women scattered across the world who'd believed Rodney's lies. Tomorrow, they would all come together. Tomorrow, they would build their case. And soon, very soon, Rodney Bartling would discover what happened when the women you underestimated decided to fight back. Wendy slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and checked her phone in the bathroom. A message from Juliet. Roxanne found something in Rodney's old emails. You need to see this. The attachment was a scanned document, adoption papers for a child in Australia, signed by Rodney under one of his false names. Another child, another secret, another life he'd touched and abandoned. Wendy looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. This woman with grey in her hair and lines around her eyes. This woman who'd given decades to a man who deserved none of it. No more, she promised her reflection. Tomorrow, the reckoning would begin. Chapter 7. The Trap. The best revenge is making a man believe he's won right before you take everything. The video conference room at Malcolm's office was small and cramped, but it held something powerful. 7 women connected by one man's lies, all of them ready to burn his world down. Wendy sat at the head of the table, flanked by Malcolm and Lorraine. On the screen before her were 6 faces: Juliet from Connecticut, Gina calling from Costa Rica, Autumn in Vancouver, Leigh in Chicago, Diane in Austin, and Sienna connected from Lorraine's guest room. In person, Rosa Vega sat to Wendy's left, her eyes hard with the kind of anger that came from grief unresolved. Thank you all for coming, Wendy began. I know this is difficult. Some of you have been living with Rodney's lies for years, others are just discovering the truth, but we all have one thing in common. We deserve justice. Justice, Gina repeated bitterly from Costa Rica. How do we even begin to get that? The man has been lying to me for nearly 2 decades. My son asks why his father only visits a few times during the year. What am I supposed to tell him? The truth, Wendy said simply. That's what we tell all of them, the truth. Malcolm pulled up a presentation on the screen beside the video feeds. I've spent the last 2 weeks building a comprehensive case against Rodney Bartling. What we have is unprecedented. Evidence of bigamy in multiple jurisdictions, fraud, tax evasion, misappropriation of corporate funds, and potentially homicide. He clicked through slides showing bank records, property deeds, marriage certificates, birth certificates. The evidence was overwhelming. The problem, Malcolm continued, is that Rodney has resources, money, connections, lawyers. If we come at him piecemeal, he'll fight us individually, drag things out, maybe even flee the country before we can stop him. So what do we do? Autumn asked from Vancouver. We coordinate, Wendy said. We hit him all at once from every direction, so fast and so hard he can't recover. Criminal charges, civil suits, public exposure. We don't give him time to spin the narrative or hide assets. There's risk, Malcolm warned. When cornered, dangerous men become more dangerous, especially if he suspects what's coming. He already suspects something, Rosa interjected. Before my sister died, she told me Rodney was paranoid, checking over his shoulder constantly. He knew someone was getting close to the truth. Then we have to move quickly, Wendy said. She looked at each woman on the screen. I need to know you're all committed, because once we start this, there's no going back. One by one, they nodded. Juliet spoke first. I wasted my whole life waiting for him. I'm done waiting. Let's take him down. Gina was next. My son deserves better than a father who treats him like a secret. I'm in. Autumn, Leigh, Diane, and Sienna all agreed. Finally, Rosa spoke, her voice thick with emotion. My sister died because of him. If we can prove it, if we can make him pay for what he did to Camilla, then I'll do whatever it takes. Malcolm pulled up a timeline. Here's the plan. We've coordinated with federal prosecutors, local police in multiple jurisdictions, and the SEC. On the same day, we'll file criminal complaints, initiate civil suits, and hold a press conference revealing everything. The media attention will make it impossible for local authorities to sweep this under the rug. What about his trip to Argentina? Juliet asked. Those tickets are for next month. What if he runs before we're ready? He won't, Wendy said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Because I'm going to make sure he thinks everything is fine. I'm going to be the perfect wife, excited about our trip, counting down the days. I'll give him no reason to suspect anything. That's dangerous, Lorraine protested. You'll be alone with him, Wendy. Look what he did to Sienna. Look what might have happened to Camilla. I'll be careful, Wendy promised, and Malcolm will have surveillance on the house. If anything seems wrong, we move up the timeline. They spent the next several hours coordinating details. Each woman had her role, gathering final documentation, giving statements to authorities, preparing to testify. Rosa would push to have Camilla's case reopened. Sienna would file assault charges. As the meeting was breaking up, Diane spoke hesitantly from Austin. What happens after? When this is all over and he's in prison or deported or whatever, what happens to us? To our kids? It was the question they'd all been thinking. We survive, Wendy said firmly. We pool resources, we support each other, and we make sure our children know they're not responsible for their father's sins. We build something better than what he left us. After everyone disconnected, Wendy sat alone in the conference room with Malcolm. She felt exhausted, hollowed out, but also strangely energized. "You're sure about this?" Malcolm asked. "Playing the devoted wife while we build the case?" "It's the only way. If Rodney suspects I know anything, he'll run. He's probably already planning escape routes, backup identities. I need to keep him comfortable, keep him thinking his secrets are safe. And if he hurts you?" Wendy met his eyes. "Then you'll have one more crime to charge him with." That evening, Wendy stopped at the store on her way home, buying ingredients for Rodney's favorite meal. She was going to be the perfect wife for the next few weeks, attentive, loving, excited about their future. She was going to give him exactly enough rope to hang himself with. At home, Rodney greeted her with a kiss, helping carry in groceries. "What's all this?" "I'm making your favorite tonight. I thought we could have a nice dinner, just the two of us. Practice for Argentina." She smiled at him, and it felt like her face might crack from the effort. Rodney's expression softened. "You're amazing. You know that? I don't tell you enough." Over dinner, Wendy played her part perfectly. She asked about his day, laughed at his stories, touched his hand across the table. She told him how excited she was about their trip, how she'd been researching Buenos Aires and had a list of places she wanted to visit. Rodney visibly relaxed. Whatever paranoia had been plaguing him seemed to ease. He even pulled out his tablet and showed her pictures of the hotel he'd booked, a luxury suite with a view of the city. What he didn't know was that Malcolm had already discovered the hotel had only one booking under Rodney's name, a single room, not a suite, and the reservation ended after 3 days. After that, the trail went cold. Rodney had never planned to stay in Buenos Aires. It was just another stop on his way to disappearing completely. "It's beautiful," Wendy said, looking at the photos. "We're going to have an amazing time." That night, Rodney was tender with her, and Wendy hated herself for being able to respond, for letting her body perform when her mind was screaming. But this was necessary. This was survival. Afterward, as Rodney slept peacefully beside her, Wendy checked her phone under the covers. Messages from the other women, all confirming they'd completed their tasks. Documents filed, statements given, evidence secured. Everything was in place. Just a few more weeks of playing the perfect wife. Just a little longer pretending her world wasn't burning down around her. Then justice. The next morning, Wendy woke to find Rodney already dressed, looking stressed as he stared at his phone. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Fine, just some issues at work." He kissed her forehead absently. "I'll be home late tonight. Don't wait up." After he left, Wendy called Malcolm. "He's rattled. Something spooked him." One of the other women might have said something, Malcolm said, or he's noticed unusual activity in his accounts. I've had forensic accountants looking into his finances. He might be seeing the walls closing in. Do we move up the timeline? Not yet. We stick to the plan. But Wendy, be careful. If he's feeling cornered— I know, Wendy said. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. That evening, Rodney came home reeking of whiskey and fear. He'd been drinking, something he rarely did. His movements were jerky, his eyes darting. Bad day? Wendy asked, keeping her voice light. Someone's been asking questions about me, about the business. One of my partners mentioned an investigator poking around, asking about my travel schedule, where I go, who I see. He looked at her with sudden intensity. You haven't talked to anyone, have you? Any reporters or investigators? Wendy kept her expression carefully neutral. Of course not. Why would I? I don't know. He ran his hands through his hair. Something feels wrong, like everything's about to fall apart. You're just stressed, Wendy soothed, moving to him. Come on, let's get you some coffee. You'll feel better after you eat something. She guided him to the kitchen, playing the concerned wife, all while her mind raced. He was starting to suspect. They were running out of time. That night, while Rodney finally slept off the alcohol, Wendy sent a message to Malcolm. We need to move, soon. He knows something's wrong. Malcolm's response came immediately. Give me 1 week. That's all I need. Can you hold him off that long? Wendy looked at her husband, sprawled across their bed, his face slack in sleep. This man who'd stolen decades of her life, who'd built an empire of lies on the backs of women who'd trusted him. 1 more week of pretending, 1 more week of being the perfect wife. She could do it. She had to. 1 week, she typed back. Then we end this. Chapter 8. The Unraveling. The best revenge is served cold in front of everyone who believed your lies. The evening of the anniversary party arrived with perfect weather. Warm autumn air, leaves turning gold, the kind of night made for celebration. Wendy stood in her kitchen, supervising caterers, checking flower arrangements, making sure every detail was flawless. It was, after all, the last party she'd ever throw as Rodney Bartling's wife. The guest list was extensive, their children and their families, Rodney's business partners, friends from the neighborhood, Lorraine and her friends, extended family from both sides. Nearly 100 people all gathered to celebrate over 3 decades of what everyone believed was a strong marriage. Only a handful of people knew the truth. Malcolm, positioned near the back with a legal team. Lorraine, her face set in grim determination. And surprisingly, Juliet and Roxanne, who'd arrived early and were helping in the kitchen. When Wendy had invited them, Juliet had been stunned. You want me at your anniversary party? I want everyone who matters at this party, Wendy had said. And whether I like it or not, you're part of this story. You deserve to see how it ends. Now Juliet moved through the kitchen with quiet efficiency, and when their eyes met, there was understanding there, solidarity, the bond of women who'd survived the same monster. Rodney appeared in his best suit, looking handsome and distinguished, the picture of a successful man celebrating his marriage. He pulled Wendy close, kissing her cheek. You look beautiful, he said. Thank you for putting all this together. Anything for you, Wendy replied, and meant it in a way he'd never understand. Guests began arriving, filling the house with laughter and conversation. Iris came with Brandon, her hand protectively over her belly. Desmond arrived with a new girlfriend. Quinn brought flowers. Everyone hugged and chatted, oblivious to the bomb about to detonate in their midst. Midway through the evening, Wendy clinked her glass, calling for attention. The room quieted, all eyes turning to her. Thank you all for coming tonight, she began, her voice steady. Rodney and I are so grateful to have you here to celebrate with us. Rodney smiled at her from across the room, raising his glass. Marriage is built on trust, Wendy continued, on honesty, on two people choosing each other every day through good times and bad, on promises kept and vows honored. People nodded, some dabbing at tears already. "Which is why," Wendy said, her voice hardening, "I need to tell you all the truth about what we're really celebrating tonight." Rodney's smile faltered. Something flickered in his eyes, warning, fear. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. "Telling the truth." Wendy pulled out a remote and activated the large screen she'd had installed that afternoon, claiming it was for a photo slideshow. Instead, the screen displayed the photograph that had started everything, Rodney holding baby Roxanne, standing beside Juliet. The room went silent. "This is Juliet Turner," Wendy said, gesturing to where Juliet stood near the kitchen door. "And this is her daughter, Roxanne Turner Bartling, Rodney's daughter, born while I was pregnant with Iris." Iris made a strangled sound. Desmond's face went white. Quinn started crying. "What the hell is this?" Rodney demanded, striding toward Wendy. "This is insane. Turn that off." But Wendy was just getting started. She clicked through more images, the passports with different names, property deeds, marriage certificates. "Rodney hasn't just been living a double life," Wendy continued. "He's been living 6 of them, 6 families, at least 8 children, multiple marriages, millions in hidden assets." The screen now showed photos of Gina with her son, Autumn with her daughter, Lay with her daughter, Diane pregnant, Sienna with her bruised face. Each of these women believed they were special, that Rodney would leave his complicated situation and choose them. He told them all the same lies, made them all the same promises. Rodney's business partners were staring at him with expressions of horror and disbelief. His mother had collapsed into a chair, sobbing into her hands. "You're lying," Rodney said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You're trying to destroy me." "I'm not destroying you," Wendy corrected. "I'm revealing you. There's a difference." She clicked to the next slide, bank statements showing the hidden accounts, the offshore money, the systematic theft from his own company. "While telling me we couldn't afford to fix our roof, Rodney was hiding tens of millions in accounts under false names. While I worked a second job to help pay off his business debts, he was buying villas in Costa Rica and apartments in Miami." Malcolm stepped forward from the back of the room. "Mr. Bartling, I'm Malcolm Reeves, private investigator. Everything Mrs. Bartling is showing you has been turned over to federal prosecutors and local authorities in multiple jurisdictions. Criminal complaints have been filed for fraud, bigamy, tax evasion, and assault." "Assault?" Rodney's face had gone ashen. Wendy clicked to a photo of Sienna's bruised face, then to police reports documenting injuries to multiple women. "You've hurt people," Wendy said. "You've controlled them, threatened them, and when they tried to leave, you made them pay for it." Iris pushed through the crowd, her face contorted with rage. "Dad, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't do this." Rodney reached for her, but Iris jerked away. "Don't touch me." "Sweetheart, I can explain." "Explain what?" Desmond's voice was deadly quiet as he approached. "Explain how you abandoned us our entire childhood for your other families. Explain why Mom raised us alone while you played father to strangers." Quinn was sobbing openly. "I asked you to come to my school plays, to my graduation. You were always too busy, but you weren't busy. You were with them." Rodney looked around wildly, seeing his world collapse. His business partners were whispering among themselves, already calculating damage control. Friends and family wore expressions of shock and betrayal. "This is all a misunderstanding," Rodney tried. "Wendy, please, if we could just talk privately." "No," Wendy said firmly. "No more private conversations. No more lies told in quiet rooms where no one can hear. Everything happens in the light now." She clicked to the final slide. Information about Camila Vega's death. "There's also the matter of a woman who threatened to expose you and died in a suspicious boating accident. Her sister, Rosa Vega, has evidence suggesting you were there the night she died. And Nina Redmond, missing since Seattle. Police are reopening that case too. Rodney's mask finally cracked. The charming, confident businessman vanished, replaced by something desperate and ugly. "You can't do this," he hissed at Wendy. "I'll fight you. I'll destroy you in court. You won't get a penny." "I don't want your money," Wendy said quietly. "I want justice. For me, for these women, for our children who grew up without a real father." She pulled out a folder and handed it to him. "Divorce papers. Already filed. I've secured a court order freezing your assets pending investigation. You can't access your accounts, can't sell your properties, can't flee the country. I also have restraining orders," Malcolm added, "preventing you from contacting any of the women or children involved in this case." Rodney stared at the papers, his hands shaking. Then he looked up at Wendy with pure hatred. "You bitch. You have no idea what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done," Wendy replied. "I've taken back my life." Police officers entered the house then. Malcolm had arranged for them to wait outside until the moment was right. They approached Rodney with handcuffs. "Rodney James Bartling, you're under arrest for fraud, tax evasion, and assault. You have the right to remain silent." As they read him his rights, Rodney's eyes never left Wendy's face. She saw rage there and fear and something else, the dawning realization that he'd underestimated her completely. The police led him away while the party guests stood in shocked silence. Wendy watched him go, feeling nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a hollow sense of finality. After he was gone, chaos erupted. Iris collapsed into Brandon's arms, sobbing. Desmond put his fist through a wall. Quinn sat on the floor, rocking back and forth. Lorraine appeared at Wendy's side, holding her up as her legs threatened to give out. "You did it," Lorraine whispered. "It's over." But it wasn't over. Not really. As guests filtered out, some in support, some in judgment, Wendy looked at her children, all of them broken, all of them betrayed, and knew the hardest part was just beginning. Healing. That was the work ahead. For all of them. Juliet approached hesitantly. "Thank you for including us, for not making Roxanne and me your enemies." "You're not my enemies," Wendy said. "He is. And now the world knows it." Later that night, long after everyone had gone, Wendy stood alone in her kitchen surrounded by the debris of the party. Half-eaten food, spilled drinks, flowers wilting in their vases. Her phone buzzed. Messages from the other women, all of them who'd watched the live stream Malcolm had set up. "Gina, you did it. You actually did it. Autumn, thank you for having the courage to start this. Lay, my daughter can finally have the truth. Diane, I'm not scared anymore. Sienna, I can breathe again. And finally, Rosa, Camilla would be proud." Wendy sat on her kitchen floor, surrounded by the ruins of her old life, and cried, not from sadness, but from relief. The performance was over. The lies were exposed. Tomorrow, she would start rebuilding. Tomorrow, she would help her children heal. Tomorrow, she would figure out who Wendy Crewson was when she wasn't Mrs. Rodney Bartling. But tonight, she just let herself feel everything she'd been holding back for weeks. Rage, grief, betrayal, loss, and underneath it all, the first fragile shoots of freedom. Chapter 9. The Rebirth. Freedom tastes like air after drowning, sweet, sharp, and impossibly precious. Wendy's new apartment was small, just a one-bedroom in downtown Hartford, but it was hers. No ghosts of Rodney's lies haunted these walls, no memories of decades wasted on a man who didn't deserve them. She stood by the window, watching rain streak down the glass, holding her morning coffee. It had been 2 months since the arrest, and the world had moved faster than she'd imagined possible. Rodney's trial was set to begin in the spring. His bail had been denied after prosecutors argued he was a massive flight risk. Those tickets to Argentina and multiple passports had sealed that decision. He sat in a county jail, his empire dismantled, his reputation destroyed. The media had devoured the story. Billionaire's web of lies ran as a headline in nearly every major paper. Talk shows debated it. True crime podcasts dissected it. Rodney had become synonymous with deception, his name a cautionary tale about the darkness that could hide behind a charming smile. But Wendy had stepped back from the spotlight after that first week. She'd given a few interviews, enough to ensure the story was told correctly, then retreated into privacy. She needed to heal, and healing didn't happen in front of cameras. The hardest part had been watching her children process their pain. Iris had thrown herself into preparing for the baby, building a nursery, reading parenting books. But Wendy saw the grief behind her daughter's eyes. Iris had loved her father, despite his neglect. Learning who he really was had shattered something fundamental in her worldview. Desmond had gone the opposite direction, channeling his rage into action. He joined the prosecution team as a victim advocate, determined to see his father pay for every crime. He'd also reached out to his half-siblings, building tentative bridges with Roxanne, with Gina's son, with all of Rodney's other children. They were forming their own support network, bonded by shared trauma. Quinn had been the most fragile. She'd always been Daddy's girl, the one who'd tried hardest to win Rodney's approval. Discovering it had all been performance had sent her into a spiral that required therapy and medication. But slowly, she was coming back to herself. Wendy's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Juliet. Over the past 2 months, Wendy and Juliet had developed an unlikely friendship. They met for coffee weekly, 2 women untangling decades of manipulation, supporting each other through the aftermath. "Morning," Wendy answered. "How are you?" "Better than yesterday, worse than tomorrow, probably." It had become their standard response. "Listen, Roxanne and I wanted to invite you to dinner tonight. We're cooking." Wendy smiled. "I'd like that." After hanging up, Wendy got dressed and headed to her job. She'd gone back to teaching, taking a position at a community college, helping adult learners finish their degrees. The work was fulfilling in a way her decades as Rodney's administrative assistant never had been. These students reminded her why she'd wanted to teach in the first place. During her lunch break, Malcolm called with an update. The investigation had expanded beyond Rodney to his business partners, several of whom had known about his fraud and helped hide it. The SEC was involved, the IRS, multiple jurisdictions. It was turning into one of the largest white-collar crime cases in recent memory. "How are you holding up?" Malcolm asked. "Some days are better than others," Wendy admitted. "But I'm not pretending anymore. That counts for something." "It counts for everything," Malcolm said. That afternoon, Wendy met Lorraine at a coffee shop. Her sister had been her rock through everything, and Wendy didn't know how she would have survived without her. "I signed the papers today," Lorraine said without preamble. "The community center. It's official." Wendy grinned. With the money from the divorce settlement and the recovered funds from Rodney's fraud, Wendy had started a foundation to help women leaving abusive relationships. The Camilla Vega Center for Women's Independence would open next month, offering counseling, legal aid, job training, and temporary housing. "Rosa's flying in for the opening," Wendy said. "She wants to speak." "And the other women? Most of them are coming. Gina, Autumn, Lay. It's important for them to see something positive come from all of this." That evening, Wendy drove to Juliet's house for dinner. The home she'd once watched with rage and grief now felt familiar, welcoming. Inside, Roxanne was setting the table while Juliet stirred something that smelled amazing on the stove. "Wendy!" Roxanne greeted her with a hug. "We made your favorite, Lorraine told us." Over dinner, they talked about everything and nothing. Roxanne shared stories about her new job at a graphic design firm. Juliet mentioned she'd started dating again, tentatively, fearfully, but trying. Wendy told them about her students, about one woman who'd gone back to school after leaving an abusive marriage and was now thriving. "That could have been any of us," Juliet said quietly. "If we'd stayed in those situations, if we hadn't found the courage to speak up." "We found it together," Wendy corrected. That's what made the difference. After dinner, Roxanne pulled out her laptop. "I've been working on something, the website for the center. I wanted your approval before we launch it." The site was beautiful, clean, professional, with photos of the building and information about services. But what caught Wendy's attention was the Our Story page, which featured brief testimonies from all the women Rodney had victimized. "We thought people should know," Roxanne explained. "Not for sensationalism, but to show that this can happen to anyone, that you're not stupid for falling for someone's lies, that there's hope on the other side." Wendy's eyes filled with tears reading the testimonies. Each woman had written about her experience, her recovery, her determination to help others avoid the same trap. "It's perfect," Wendy said. Walking back to her car later, Wendy felt lighter than she had in decades. She was building something real, something lasting, not an empire of lies like Rodney had, but a foundation of truth that would help people long after she was gone. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Bartling, this is Leon Hayes. We met briefly at Malcolm's office. I'm the trauma counselor working with the center. I wanted to reach out about possibly coordinating our efforts. Coffee sometime?" Wendy stared at the message. Leon Hayes. She remembered him. Tall, kind eyes, soft-spoken. A widower who'd lost his wife to domestic violence and dedicated his life to helping other survivors. She typed back, "Coffee sounds good." "Tomorrow at 10. His response was immediate. "Perfect. Looking forward to it." Wendy smiled, sliding her phone back into her pocket. She wasn't looking for romance, wasn't even sure she was capable of trusting someone that way again. But coffee with someone who understood trauma and healing? That felt safe. That night, alone in her apartment, Wendy spread out papers on her kitchen table. College applications. She was thinking of going back to school herself, getting a master's in education or counseling. At her age, it seemed absurd, but also liberating. Her whole life was being rebuilt from scratch. Why not dream bigger than she ever had before? A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Iris stood in the hallway, her belly noticeably larger now, her eyes red from crying. "Can I come in?" "Always," Wendy said, pulling her daughter into her arms. They sat on the couch, Iris curled against her mother like she used to as a child. "I saw him today," Iris whispered. "Dad, through the window at the courthouse. He looked so small, Mom. So broken." "Good," Wendy said, then softened her tone. "I'm sorry you saw him. I know that must have been hard. I wanted to feel something, anger or pity or even hatred, but I just felt empty." Iris touched her belly. "This baby will never know him, and I don't know if that makes me sad or relieved." "Probably both," Wendy said honestly. "Grief is complicated. You're allowed to mourn the father you thought you had while being angry at the man he actually was." They sat in silence for a long time, mother and daughter, both healing from wounds inflicted by the same man. "Do you think you'll ever be able to trust anyone again?" Iris asked. Wendy thought about the question carefully. "I think I'm learning to trust myself again. That's the first step. Everything else comes after." Iris nodded against her shoulder. "I want my baby to know you, the real you, the strong woman who stood up and said enough." "They will," Wendy promised. "And they'll know you too. My fierce daughter who's breaking cycles and building something better." After Iris left, Wendy returned to her college applications with renewed determination. She was done letting fear stop her, done playing small to make someone else comfortable. She was Wendy Crewson, not Mrs. Rodney Bartling, not a victim, not a survivor even, though that was part of her story. She was a woman rebuilding her life exactly as she wanted it, surrounded by other women doing the same thing. And that, she realized, was the truest form of revenge, thriving in the space where he'd tried to break her, creating beauty from the ashes of his destruction. Chapter 10. The Empire of Love. True power isn't built in boardrooms or bank accounts, it's forged in the courage to choose yourself. The art gallery was bathed in afternoon light, illuminating canvases that told a story of survival. Wendy stood at the center of the room, surrounded by her paintings, bold, raw pieces that chronicled her journey from darkness into light. The opening had drawn a crowd larger than she'd anticipated. Her children stood near the entrance, Iris holding her daughter Camilla, named for the woman who'd almost exposed Rodney's crimes. Desmond with his arm around his girlfriend. Quinn, healthier now, smiling with genuine warmth. Lorraine moved through the crowd like a proud mother, pointing out her favorite pieces to anyone who'd listen. But it was the other women who made Wendy's throat tight with emotion. Juliet and Roxanne had designed the gallery's promotional materials, and they stood near their work, pointing out details to curious visitors. Gina had flown in from Costa Rica with her son, a teenager who looked like Rodney but had his mother's kindness. Autumn arrived from Vancouver, her daughter beside her. Leigh had driven in from Chicago with her daughter. Diane, no longer pregnant, held her infant son while explaining to someone how this community of women had saved her life. And Sienna, the youngest of them all, had found her voice. She stood near a painting titled Bruises Heal, sharing her story with a reporter who was documenting the opening. Rosa Vega was there too, standing before the centerpiece painting, a phoenix rising from flames titled For Camilla. Tears streamed down her face. She would have loved this, Rosa whispered when Wendy joined her. All of us together, not as victims, but as warriors. We're building something your sister never got to see, Wendy said. But it exists because of her courage to speak up, even when it cost her everything. The Camilla Vega Center had opened 3 months ago and was already operating at capacity. Women came from across the state, seeking shelter, seeking help, seeking the kind of support that all of them had needed when they were trapped in Rodney's web. Wendy's role had evolved beyond running the center. She taught classes now, art therapy, self-defense, financial literacy, skills she'd had to relearn herself, skills that gave women tools to rebuild their lives. Ms. Cruson, a reporter approached with a recorder. Can I ask you a few questions about the opening? Wendy nodded, and the reporter gestured to the paintings. Your work is incredibly powerful. How does it feel to be here, creating art, after everything you've been through? It feels like breathing, Wendy said simply. For decades I held my breath, waiting for someone else to give me permission to exhale. Now I just breathe. Your ex-husband's trial concluded last month. He received a long sentence for fraud, bigamy, assault, and manslaughter in the death of Camilla Vega. Does that feel like justice? Wendy considered the question. Justice looks different for everyone. For me, justice isn't just about him being in prison. It's about all of us standing here, free and whole. It's about women finding safety at the center. It's about my grandchildren growing up in honesty instead of lies. Speaking of family, I understand you have someone special here today? Wendy glanced toward the entrance where Leon Hayes stood, holding 2 cups of coffee, waiting patiently. They'd been together for over a year now, building something slow and real and fundamentally different from anything Wendy had known before. Leon didn't try to save her or fix her. He didn't demand she be smaller to make him feel bigger. He just walked beside her, supporting her work, celebrating her victories, holding space for her grief. I do, Wendy said, but he's not what makes me special. I am. The reporter blinked, surprised, then smiled. That's a beautiful answer. After the interview, Wendy made her way to Leon. He handed her coffee and kissed her temple. Your paintings are magnificent, he said. You should be very proud. I am, and she meant it. Pride wasn't something she'd allowed herself for most of her life. Now she claimed it freely. They walked through the gallery together, Leon pausing to study each piece. The paintings told the story chronologically. The first, dark and chaotic, represented the discovery of Rodney's betrayal. The middle pieces showed the journey of fighting back, of gathering the women, of building the case. The final paintings exploded with color and light, freedom, rebirth, joy. Near the back, Wendy noticed a familiar figure standing alone. Helen Moreau, Rodney's biological mother, the woman who'd sent that final photograph that revealed even Rodney's name, had been a lie. Wendy approached her, and Helen turned with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for inviting me," Helen said. "I wasn't sure I should come." "You should absolutely be here," Wendy said. "Without you, we might never have learned the full truth." "I tried to warn people for so long," Helen whispered. "But Daniel was always so good at disappearing, at becoming someone new." They stood together looking at a painting Helen had been studying, a portrait of all the women and children Rodney had hurt, standing together, arms linked. Wendy had titled it, "The Empire He Couldn't Destroy." "You know what the irony is?" Helen said. "Daniel spent his whole life trying to build an empire, trying to be someone important, but the real empire, the one that will last, is this." She gestured to the room full of women supporting each other. "You built something real from his lies. That's power he never understood." Later, as the opening was winding down, Wendy gathered everyone in the center of the gallery. All the women who'd been part of Rodney's web, their children, her own family, Leon, Helen, Malcolm, Rosa. "I want to thank you all for being here," Wendy began. 2 years ago, I found a photograph that destroyed my world. I thought that was the worst day of my life. But I was wrong. It was the first day of my real life." She looked at each woman in turn. "We came together as strangers, connected by one man's cruelty. But we've become something more powerful than he could ever imagine. A family built on truth instead of lies. A family we chose." Gina stepped forward. "My son asked me yesterday what he should do if he ever meets his father after he gets out of prison. I told him he doesn't owe him anything. He's just the man who gave him DNA. His real family is here, in this room." Autumn nodded. "My daughter used to ask why her father never stayed. Now she knows it wasn't about her, and she has sisters and brothers who understand exactly what that feels like." Roxanne spoke next, her voice strong. "I spent my whole childhood wondering why I wasn't enough to make my father stay. Now I know I was always enough. He was the one who was lacking." Sienna, the youngest, had tears streaming down her face. "You all saved my life. I was so lost, so controlled, but you showed me I could be strong, that I deserved better. I'm in school now, studying social work. I want to help other young women who get trapped like I did." Iris adjusted baby Camilla in her arms. "My daughter will never meet her grandfather, but she'll know her grandmother is the strongest woman I've ever met. And she'll grow up surrounded by women who survived and thrived. That's the legacy that matters." Wendy felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of pain anymore. They were tears of pride, of gratitude, of hard-won peace. Rosa stepped forward, pulling something from her bag. "I have something for all of you." She handed out small pendants, each one bearing a phoenix symbol. Camilla loved phoenixes. She used to say that's what she was becoming, something beautiful rising from ashes. She didn't live to see her transformation complete, but all of you did. Wear these and remember, we don't just survive, we rise. One by one, the women fastened the pendants around their necks, a symbol of their shared journey, their collective strength. As the gathering broke up, Leon approached Wendy quietly. "There's someone outside," he said. "He's been standing across the street for the past hour. Says his name is Thomas Moreau." Wendy looked at Helen, who'd gone pale. "My other son," Helen whispered. "Daniel's older brother. I haven't seen him in 30 years." Wendy walked outside, Leon close behind her, and found a man in his 70s standing on the sidewalk. He had Rodney's eyes, but his face was weathered with genuine age and what looked like regret. "Mrs. Bartling?" His voice was rough. "I'm Thomas Moreau. Daniel was my younger brother." "Was?" Wendy asked. Thomas pulled out an envelope. "The prison called me this morning. Daniel died last night, heart attack in his cell. The words hung in the air. Rodney was dead. The man who'd destroyed so many lives, who'd spent decades building empires of deception, was gone. Wendy felt nothing. No grief, no relief. Just emptiness, where anger used to live. "I'm not here for sympathy," Thomas continued. "I'm here because before he died, he asked the prison to deliver this to you." He held out the envelope. "I volunteered to bring it. I wanted to see the woman who finally stopped him." Wendy took the envelope but didn't open it. "Why did you disappear from his life?" "Because I saw what he was becoming when we were teenagers. The lies, the manipulation. I tried to help him, but he was too far gone. So I left and never looked back. Maybe I should have done more. Or maybe he would have destroyed you too," Wendy said. "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved." Thomas nodded, then looked past her to the gallery where the women were visible through the windows. "Is it true? All those families he built?" "Yes." "And they're all in there together, supporting each other?" "Yes." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. Then something good came from something terrible. That's more than Daniel deserved. After he left, Wendy stood on the sidewalk holding the envelope. Leon waited patiently beside her. "Do you want to open it?" he asked. "Not yet. Maybe never." Wendy looked back at the gallery, at the women inside who'd become her family. "Whatever's in here, it doesn't matter. He doesn't get the last word in my story." That evening, back in her apartment with Lorraine and Leon beside her, Wendy opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 words written in Rodney's handwriting. "You were right." That was all. No explanation, no apology, no begging for forgiveness. Just an acknowledgement that, in the end, she had won. Wendy read the words once, then folded the paper and placed it in a box with the original photograph from the briefcase, the one that had started everything. She sealed the box and put it on a high shelf. "That's the past," she said. "I'm done living there." The next morning, Wendy woke early and drove to the cemetery where they'd buried Rodney. There was no headstone yet, just a temporary marker with his name. Wendy stood at the grave alone. She didn't pray, didn't cry, didn't say goodbye. She just stood there for a moment, looking at the earth that covered a man who'd spent his entire life running from himself and felt the final chain break free. "You spent your whole life trying to be someone you weren't," Wendy said quietly. "Building fake identities, fake families, fake empires. You thought that made you powerful. But real power is standing in your truth even when it's ugly. Real power is choosing yourself without destroying others. You never learned that." She turned and walked away, her steps light, her shoulders straight. Back at her car, she found a message from Juliet. "The center just received its largest donation yet. An anonymous benefactor gave $500,000 in Camilla's name. We can expand, help more women." Wendy smiled. The empire they were building, one of truth, support and healing, was growing stronger every day. That afternoon, she taught her art therapy class at the center. New women filled the room, each carrying her own story of survival. Wendy handed out canvases and paints. "Today, I want you to paint your freedom," she instructed. "Not what you're running from, but what you're running toward. Who are you when no one is controlling you? When you're not performing for someone else's approval?" The women began painting, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. One woman painted herself with wings, another painted a garden full of flowers, a third painted herself in a graduation gown, the degree she'd been prevented from finishing. These were the real empires, Wendy thought. Not buildings or bank accounts, but the reclaimed dreams of women who'd been told they were nothing. That evening, Wendy met her children for dinner. They'd asked for family time, just the 4 of them. "Dad's dead," Desmond said bluntly once they'd ordered. "I thought I'd feel something, but I don't." "I feel relieved," Quinn admitted. "Is that horrible?" It's honest, Wendy said. You're allowed to feel however you feel. There's no right way to grieve someone who hurt you. Do you think he ever loved us? Iris asked, the question they'd all been avoiding. Any of us? Or were we just props in whatever game he was playing? Wendy thought about this carefully. I think Rodney loved the idea of having families. Plural. I think he loved the power it gave him, the validation. But did he love any of us the way family should be loved? With sacrifice and presence and honesty? No, he didn't know how. Then we'll just have to love each other enough to make up for it, Desmond said. Us and our half-siblings, and all those women at the center, we'll be the family he never was. Weeks passed. The gallery show ended, but Wendy's paintings had sold for enough money to fund scholarships for women at the center. She enrolled in graduate school herself, pursuing a degree in art therapy. On a crisp morning, Leon took her hand across the lunch table. I have something to tell you, Leon said. I've been offered a position in California, directing a trauma center out there. It's a huge opportunity. Wendy's heart sank for a moment. Then she caught herself. That's wonderful, Leon. You should take it. I want you to come with me, he said quickly. But not because I'm asking you to follow me, because I think you'd love the program there. They're looking for an art therapy director. I mentioned your work and they're interested in interviewing you. Wendy stared at him. You're not asking me to give up my life to follow you. I'm asking you to consider if a new opportunity aligns with the life you're building. If it does, great. If it doesn't, I'll stay here or we'll figure out long distance. But Wendy, I will never ask you to make yourself smaller for me. That's not love. Tears spilled down her cheeks. This was what partnership looked like. Not possession, not control, but two whole people choosing each other without losing themselves. I'll think about it, she said, and whatever I decide, it'll be my choice. That's all I want, Leon said. That night, Wendy called an emergency meeting. Juliet, Roxanne, Lorraine, and Rosa. She told them about California. What do you want to do? Juliet asked. I don't know yet, Wendy admitted. Part of me wants to stay here, keep building what we've started, but part of me wants to see what else is possible. I spent so many years in one place, trapped. The idea of choosing to move on my own terms feels like freedom. The center doesn't need you physically here to exist, Rosa pointed out. We've built something sustainable. You could consult remotely, visit regularly. The work would continue. And honestly, Roxanne added, seeing you choose adventure, choose possibility, that's inspiring. That's the example we all need. Lorraine was quiet for a long moment. I think you should go, she finally said. Not because I want you to leave, but because I want you to live, really live. You've spent enough time being afraid. Time to be brave. 2 months later, Wendy stood in her nearly empty apartment, boxes packed and labeled. Her children had already said their goodbyes. The women from the center had thrown her a going-away party, celebrating not her departure, but her courage to keep growing. Now, on her last morning in Connecticut, Wendy drove to one final place, the house she'd shared with Rodney. It had sold quickly, bought by a young family with children and dogs and honest laughter. She parked across the street and looked at the place where she'd spent decades playing a role. A little girl ran out of the front door, chasing a puppy, her parents following with coffee mugs and genuine smiles. The house was alive again with real love, real family. Wendy smiled and drove away for the last time. On the highway heading west, Leon in the passenger seat, Wendy felt something settle in her chest. Not happiness exactly, that was too simple a word, but contentment, peace. Her phone buzzed with messages from the group chat. Gina sending photos of her son's soccer game, Autumn sharing news that she'd started dating again, Lay posting about her daughter's achievement, Diane celebrating her thriving baby, Sienna announcing her acceptance into grad school, Juliet and Roxanne planning a trip to visit. They were all moving forward, all building lives based on truth instead of lies, all refusing to let one man's betrayal define them forever. "You okay?" Leon asked, glancing at her. Wendy looked at the open road ahead, at the vast possibility stretching before her, and smiled. "I'm more than okay," she said. "I'm free." They drove west toward new beginnings, toward possibilities that Wendy had never allowed herself to imagine during all those years of playing small, of accepting crumbs, of believing that someone else's love was more valuable than her own self-worth. The photograph that had shattered her world was boxed up in storage now, preserved but powerless. It had served its purpose, revealing the truth, catalyzing change, giving her permission to stop pretending. Rodney Bartling had spent his entire life building an empire of lies, thinking that made him powerful, thinking that controlling others meant he was in control. He died in a prison cell, alone, unmourned, his legacy nothing but cautionary tales and damaged people. Wendy Crewson had taken the worst betrayal of her life and alchemized it into purpose. She'd gathered the women he'd hurt and helped them transform their pain into power. She'd shown her children that love meant honesty, that family meant choice, that legacy wasn't about how much you accumulated, but about how many lives you touched with truth. Rodney's empire had crumbled the moment people saw it for what it was: hollow, false, built on sand. Wendy's empire, of truth, of healing, of women supporting women, of honest love and chosen family, would last for generations. That was real power. That was true revenge. Not destroying him, but building something so beautiful, so true, so lasting, that his lies became irrelevant footnotes in a much larger story about survival, transformation, and the unbreakable strength of women who refused to stay silent. As the sun set over the highway and California drew closer, Wendy reached over and took Leon's hand, no longer afraid of connection, no longer performing for anyone's approval. She was simply herself. Wendy Crewson, survivor, warrior, teacher, artist, friend, mother, grandmother, woman. Enough. Always enough. Finally, completely, truthfully enough. The photograph that ended forever had actually begun everything. And what she'd built from those ashes would burn bright long after Rodney Bartling's name faded into nothing.